Hi, I'm Abby from RTINGS.com. Today we're reviewing the Sony BRAVIA 3, the runt of the litter in Sony's 2024 lineup. This entry-level TV comes in a range of sizes, from 43 to 85 inches, and effectively replaces the X80K from 2022. We bought and tested the 75-inch BRAVIA 3, which uses a 60Hz IPS panel. Some folks report that certain sizes of the BRAVIA 3 use a VA panel instead, so it's possible our results here might not apply to every size. With no local dimming and a pretty basic feature set, this is certainly a TV of all time. But does it stand out in the sea of entry-level models? And is it worth your money? Let's find out. There isn't a whole lot to be said about the design. It looks good and feels decently well built for a budget TV. The design language is reminiscent of the other models in the BRAVIA lineup, with a checkerboard pattern on the back, but the bezels are a bit thicker here. The TV uses two simple metal feet, and they can't be adjusted, so you'll need to make sure your TV table is wide enough to hold the TV. You should have enough clearance for most soundbars though, and there are clips on the feet for basic cable management. The inputs are on the left side of the TV if you're facing it from the front, and include 4 HDMI ports. All of them are limited to HDMI 2.0 bandwidth. Port number 3 is also the eARC port, but unfortunately it can't pass through any DTS formats, which are commonly used on Blu-rays. Thankfully though, this TV does support Dolby Vision HDR. Other inputs include an ATSC 3.0 tuner for over-the-air content, a digital optical audio out port, an Ethernet port, an infrared in port, and 2 USB ports, one of which supports USB 3.0. It also supports Wi-Fi up to 6 GHz, so no matter what internet you're using, it'll be supported. Like other BRAVIA TVs, the BRAVIA 3 is equipped with version 12 of Google TV and has the usual inescapable ads we've all come to know and love. It has the same new blue speckled remote, which we've already covered extensively in our previous reviews. Suffice to say, it controls the TV remotely, with dedicated app buttons and a mic for voice control. So let's move on to picture quality. As mentioned, there's no local dimming here, so the contrast is not good. If you have any highlights on screen, black levels are raised and blacks look dull and gray. Our unit doesn't have the best black uniformity either, so you may notice some clouding in bluish areas when watching dark scenes in a dark room. As for brightness, the BRAVIA 3 has okay HDR brightness. Highlights in HDR content stand out a bit, especially in darker scenes, but overall it just doesn't get bright enough to really make bright highlights pop. In combination with its terrible contrast, that means it just doesn't provide a very impactful HDR experience. On the plus side, it does have excellent PQ EOTF tracking, so at least HDR content is displayed accurately. Darker scenes in blacks are somewhat raised, but otherwise content mastered at all nit levels is displayed almost exactly as intended, right up until the TV's peak brightness, where there's a gradual roll-off to preserve some details in the highlights. Thankfully, the TV's brightness is very good for SDR, and you shouldn't have much issue with glare in brighter rooms. But it still falls far behind the higher-end models and even some of the cheaper budget competition from Hisense and TCL. Speaking of glare, the BRAVIA 3 has decent reflection handling. Its semi-gloss finish does an excellent job of reducing indirect reflections from ambient light sources, but direct reflections, like a lamp positioned somewhere in front of the screen, can still be quite distracting. The 75-inch BRAVIA 3 model we tested uses an IPS panel, so the viewing angle is great. You do lose some brightness and colors look more washed out from extreme angles, but the image stays quite consistent overall, making this a good choice for wide seating arrangements. It's also a very accurate TV right out of the box. The SDR Color Accuracy on our unit is fantastic, with perfect color temperature and very few inaccuracies in white balance or colors. Gamma is also pretty close to the target, but scenes tend to be displayed a bit darker than intended. With calibration, you can further reduce any inaccuracies with color and white balance and set the gamma right on target. The BRAVIA 3 also has a great color gamut for HDR content. It has near full coverage of the DCI-P3 color space used in most HDR content, but unfortunately most colors are off the mark and appear undersaturated. It doesn't cover nearly as much of the wider Rec 2020 space, and once again, all colors here are undersaturated and riddled with inaccuracies. Color volume is decent too, but because of the TV's terrible contrast, it can't produce dark saturated colors well, while its brightness limits how vibrantly it can display bright saturated colors. Overall, it just struggles to create a truly impactful HDR experience. Let's talk about image processing, because this TV is sure to pick up some points there, right? Sony is ahead of the game when it comes to processing, and the BRAVIA 3, sure enough, does a great job of smoothing out artifacts like macro blocking and low bitrate content like YouTube videos and streaming apps, while still preserving plenty of detail. It also upscales low-resolution sources like DVDs and cable channels very well. While fine details are still a bit muddy, it sharpens the image up quite nicely overall. The BRAVIA 3 also uses a flicker-free backlight, unlike most TVs, so those of you who are sensitive to flicker can rejoice. But of course, this is something that won't impact most people. 24p Judder is removed automatically from 24Hz sources like a Blu-ray player and native apps, which is great. But the TV doesn't remove Judder from 60Hz sources like cable boxes and older streaming devices that lack a match frame rate feature. While this is a budget model with limited features, you might still want to know how well suited it is to gaming. It won't earn any favor from hardcore gamers since it's only a 60Hz panel and doesn't support any VRR tech to reduce screen tearing. But if you just want a basic TV to play games on, it'll certainly fit the bill. You will not, however, get the most out of next-gen consoles here, since it only supports 4K at up to 60Hz. At least if you're using a PC, it displays Chroma 444 properly, and because it's an IPS panel, there are no issues with text rendering. Thankfully, input lag is incredibly low in game mode and graphics mode, so you'll at least get a responsive gaming experience. Plus, with its auto low latency mode, it'll automatically switch over to game mode when it detects a console as an input device. Response time is only decent though. There's noticeable motion blur behind fast-moving objects, which can definitely detract from most video games. Finally, let's get into sound quality. Given that this is an entry-level TV, you may not have the budget for a dedicated sound system or soundbar. But if you really care about sound quality, that's the way to go. Otherwise, the built-in speakers will be just fine, like most TV speakers. There's little bass to speak of, but dialogue is clear at most listening levels. At higher volumes, however, there's some noticeable distortion, and dialogue is more drowned out in the mix. The speakers don't get especially loud either, so they're better suited to smaller rooms or quieter environments. So, should you buy this TV? Well, the BRAVIA 3 is a tough sell as a value proposition. It's just not worth the price for what you get, or rather what you don't get, especially compared to similarly priced models and even cheaper models from budget brands like Hisense and TCL. The Hisense U6N, for example, offers a bit more bang for your buck with a local dimming feature that gives it much better contrast. It also gets a bit brighter and offers more features for gamers, including VRR and a faster response time. Sony does, however, have better color accuracy and image processing, and Sony TVs are generally known to be reliable. So if you're just looking for a basic yet reliable TV that you won't be doing much gaming on, you might still prefer the BRAVIA 3. Or you would, if the older X85K wasn't still around. For just a little more money, you can get a Sony X85K and have 120Hz refresh rate, HDMI 2.1 ports, VRR, better brightness, and better contrast, despite it also lacking a local dimming feature. Of course, because it's an older model with an older processor, low-quality content smoothing isn't as good, but that shouldn't be a deal breaker considering all of its other advantages. Well, that's all we've got for you on the Sony BRAVIA 3. If you want to dive deeper, check out our full review on the website using the link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm Abby from Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. Ready? All right. It's Monday. You know what that means. Crazy. But does it stand out in the C level of entry? Nope.